ఓం శ్రీ గురుభ్యో నమః. అందరికీ నమస్కారం. You might have observed that when you undertake any holy actions or sacred doings, before you begin the utterance of any holy name and do any sacred actions, holy actions, you utter and you begin such actions or utterances with the word Om. So, what is the significance of this utterance and what is the meaning of it? Let us examine. Om means that is whole, this is whole. So that represents the innermost core of your being. Because it is not yet known, it is called this. So that is invisible and unknown. This is visible and known. So whatever is known and visible to an unenlightened person, we call it this, till that is known. So whatever happens, it happens only in the eternal and whole. Every change which happens is dependent on the whole and eternal. So the axle and wheel, see, every movement of the wheel is dependent on the axle. Similarly, every change is dependent on the eternal. Birth and death happens in something which is never born and which never dies. That is whole, that is eternal. So unless you know that I mean your innermost core of your being, you will not come to know this nature of duality. When once that is known, this also disappears. So the duality disappears. When the duality disappears, it becomes whole. So it is like this. For those who have known that for them this also becomes that, and that also becomes this. The duality disappears. Similarly, when once you dive into your own consciousness, then you come to know who you are and from where you have come and to where you are going. It is like this. A man is standing on the shore of an ocean. He wants to measure the depth of the ocean. Just by standing and seeing at the ocean, he will not be able to know and measure the depth of the ocean. He has to dive into the ocean, not for swimming, to know the depth of the ocean. So when he dives into the ocean, diving is so deep that he disappears himself into the ocean and become one with the ocean. Then only in that oneness he realizes the depth of the ocean. Similarly, when you dive yourself into your own consciousness, you come to know the unity and oneness with the infinite divinity, and in that oneness you realize the God, the Almighty, your own Creator. So the people, there are people who argue about the existence of a God without any experience. They talk so much about God, but those who know, who have realized themselves by diving deep into their own consciousness, their presence itself is a proof. Their very existence radiates the fragrance of the ultimate reality. So, unenlightened people who always dwell in duality, when they start melting into that, for them this also starts evaporating. This also starts disappearing. They come to know, they come to realize that ultimate reality which is beyond duality. See, those who have realized, they cannot prove, they cannot produce any proof about the existence of that infinite divinity. So, they only speak in the language of silence with the divinity. Their language of communion is only in silence. So, God is a subjective experience. God is not an object to be proved. Only senses can reach the object, but beyond the senses only you can realize and experience the God, the infinity. So, object, God is not an object to be proved and available to the senses. Object is a very significant word, and it has got a very hidden meaning. Object means hindrance. See, when you want to pass through a wall, it objects. You will be hit by the wall. Wall is an object. You cannot pass through it. But God, you can pass through Him. You can live only with Him and in Him. Your heart beating is so close. Your breathing is God. Your heart beating is God. You cannot separate Him. He is inseparable in you. You can only feel Him. So, when your being starts dwelling into that infinite consciousness, then all the dualities disappear into that whole and eternal infinite. When in that process of merging into that, your this starts, this means your known starts melting into that. In that light of wisdom, in that crystal clear clarity and transparency and purity, you start realizing the oneness with your own creation. So, you might have observed that snake is glorified as a symbol of wisdom in almost all the religions. So, you must have seen some ancient pictures where the snake biting its own tail. So, what does it indicate? The snake is a symbolism of the hidden energy of Kundalini in the human being, in the Mooladhara. So, when it starts rising, when it starts uncoiling itself, something happens in his consciousness. So, the man, when he turns his consciousness, when he moves into his own consciousness, then that energy starts rising upwards to higher dimensions. So, that's why they give utmost preference in some kind of yogic practices to raising of this energy. So, the point here is the God is a subjective experience. The God is not an object to be proved. The God cannot be a collective experience. Science depends on collective experience, but whereas God is a subjective experience. So, man, when he is fully conscious and aware, he then, in that state only, he comes to know about the infinite wisdom of God and nature. See, Buddha, Gautam Buddha, as you all know, Ananda, a close disciple of Buddha, asked him one question. See, Ananda has served Buddha at all times for more than 40 years. So he asked Buddha, I have been serving you for more than 40 years and observing you all the time. I have been in association with you at almost all the time. I have observed one thing, that is, when you sleep, but you are fully awake and aware in that sleep. You are so fresh and so much alive every moment, and then you will not change any posture when you are in sleep. In whatever posture you lie down to sleep, you will get up from the same posture without any change. So, I am unable to understand how it is possible for you and which is impossible for us. So, Buddha replied like this, Ananda, when man is awakened and became conscious once, then for a man who is fully conscious, how can the clouds of sleep overcome on him? It is impossible. So, I am aware and awake all the time. Another point is, there is no mind. When there is no mind, the body is just like a corpse. So it will be in the same position wherever and in whichever position I put it before sleep. So this is what the Buddha replied. And he also said, the nature of the body is unconsciousness. The nature of the soul is fully conscious and full awareness. An enlightened person lives in three things: body, mind, and soul. So, for an enlightened person, mind is no more. He is able to overcome the turmoil and chaos of the mind. That's why the mind no longer disturbs him. Whereas for an unenlightened person, mind disturbs him in the form of dreams, and it is always functional even during sleep. So for an enlightened person, there are only two things: body and soul. So the body, because of its disactivity, it requires rest in the form of sleep. So the body goes to sleep every day, and mind is always there, and soul is fully awake. For an enlightened person, only body and soul are there. As the body requires sleep and rest, it goes to sleep, and soul is already awake. So for me, as there is no mind and the body requires sleep and rest because of the activity during daytime, it goes to sleep. My body goes to sleep and rests. My soul is already awake. So the conscious person does everything in full consciousness, and once awakening happens and arises in any human being, then he becomes one with that infinite nature and God, and it transcends the world and become one and realizes that infinite divinity. Thank you.